Welcome to another episode of the NCLA Podcast. I am your host, Rachel Mann, and joining us today is Frank Polen. And Frank is beginning his 9th year as the Assistant Superintendent, Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Adult Education Director. That is one big title, Frank, at the Buckeye Career Center in New Philadelphia, Ohio. And Frank has a fascinating portfolio and bio of make sure you expand upon the details of this podcast to read all about him. Is very passionate about CTE and about his role in leadership and also developing other leaders. He is the board president of the Tuscarawas County Chamber of Commerce and is a board of trustee member for the Ohio FFA Association and was chosen as one of the charter class of only 20 leaders across the United States by the Association of Career and Technical Education, ACTE, which is one of our close partners, as a next level post-secondary CTE leader. And he's also a past recipient of the NCLA Dave Berryman Scholarship Award for Leadership and Development, which is through our organization with NCLA. Welcome to the podcast, Frank.
Rachel, it's an absolute pleasure to be with you today.
You know, I was trying to remember because I know I met you at an NCLA conference years ago, and I was trying to remember if it was in New Mexico.
Yeah. I think it was 2017 out in New Mexico. That is correct.
Okay.
And then I think we touched base again in California as part of the ACTE.
Well, that means that we are long overdue for having you on the podcast. We should have had you on here a long time ago, but I really enjoyed listening to a keynote that you did that you posted on LinkedIn recently, which triggered me to reach out to you to be on the podcast because it was just, I really enjoyed the different lessons and what you were talking about before. But before I jump into anything connected to that, can you just talk a little bit about your backstory and how you got involved into CTE and your leadership journey within CTE?
Sure. Thank you again, Rachel. I guess my story is just a little bit different than a lot of people's, how you get into CTE, how I get into education. I was the youngest of 4 children. Neither of my parents had graduated high school. I had 2 older sisters that went to college. I had an older brother that went in the military. In our area, you either went to work or the military if you were a guy. And I really wanted to go to college. I guess looking back, the reason I was wanting to go to college, because I think everyone else kind of expected me to go to college, and I wanted to play sports and things along that lines. And I did that in all of 6 weeks, Rachel. And I made that phone call home, and it was kind of interesting because Dad answered the phone, and I was hoping to speak to Mom, of course. And it was one of those, hey, humming around a little bit, and hey, can you? I don't think I belong here. Can you come get me? And there's a long, awkward pause. And my dad just said pretty much, he said, well, I'll tell you what, you're man enough to make that decision. You're man enough to get home on your own. And so there started the journey of finding my $200 car and some change on the floor to throw some stuff in there to get home. And now I come home and 6 weeks after school, and it's one of those, what are you going to do now? And our first visit was his grandma's house. And it was one of those, Rachel, I imagine some of your background, you had that grandma that you didn't want to disappoint. And grandma says, well, you better be getting back down to school, right? And it's kind of like I go silent. And my dad says, you tell her I'm not, one of those situations. And from there, it was just like, okay, now I've got no skill. I've got no education. I've got no job. And I got big debt because they went ahead and billed me for the entire semester. So I worked some different jobs. I became a trash man. In that course of becoming a trash man, I worked sales at night of a local mall shopping area. And then my dad got sick, and I ended up taking a 2-year journey into the brickyard world. So got a brickyard education for real, included some mine work, but really kind of took care of the family. My dad passed away, and I had an opportunity to get back into school, just pure dumb luck. I was working at that mall, and this college basketball coach came in and had recruited me a couple years prior and just got a new job, says, hey, are you interested in going to school? I've got no players, and if you're interested. And my dad had just recently passed away, and I went back in the fall a couple years after I graduated high school. And from there, it became easy, and we'll talk about a little bit later, probably relationships determine results. And I think I had a lot of people help me along the way, and was blessed with a lot of influential adults to get me in the right journey, and had opportunity. I taught, I coached. And when this opportunity came up, there was an assistant superintendent job and a director of adult education job. And through the course of it, they decided to combine those positions. And for the first 4 years, I did both jobs without any assistance. And then I got an assistant director of adult education, and been able to help manage the office, and as things have gone. But kind of a shortened version of the path to how you get to where you want to go. Just keep doing things, keep your nose clean, keep moving forward. And I think that was the best part of my experiences.
Well, that happens quite a bit in education, doesn't it? Two or three jobs turn into one job, and we make it work.
No question. Nothing works unless you do, Rachel, right? So you got to be willing to do things. A lot of people say, I wish I could do what you do. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not sure you'd like to do what I had to do to get to do what I get to do now.
That is such a good point. That is so true. It's easy for it to look very sugar coated from the outside, but it's not something that you just walk into. It's all of those skills, building on those skills that get you to where you're at. And you had some really good lessons that you shared in your keynote. One of them was on the 4 T's. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it was probably in believe it or not, about 1999, let's say. I'm really dating myself here. I was a middle school teacher, and a highway patrolman, a retired Kentucky highway patrolman by the name of Leo Mudd came and spoke to the students. And I'm guessing most of the students remember some of the funny stories that he talked about. But one of the things he said was 4 T's. And I've used that from that day forward with anything decision I've tried to make. I've tried to use it as I've counseled young children, as a principal of elementary kids, to my own family. And the 4 T's are real simple. Take time to think. And I guess if we take time to think, we take that pause, we step back, chances are we're probably going to make a better decision, because if we take that time to think, we pause for a second, we may think, what will happen to me if I do this? And I guess that would be a big point in social media today. If we would just say, if I push this button, this mean tweet or whatever it is, and it's going to come back to cost me a job 20, 30 years from now, chances are you wouldn't do it. So just that pause, before you strike out, before you lash out, if you just take that pause, the 4 T's, and I do, Rachel, I have it on sticky notes at different places around my home, or in the mirror when you're shaving in the morning, you look at it and you just kind of look at that, and it makes you remind, it's right here by my desk, the 4 T's. Just take time to think, and chances are we're going to make better decisions, and everything's going to be better for us and others.
Well, that is sound advice. I think that applies to anything in life, even for guiding students, getting them to learn that at a young age. You also had another piece that you shared in that keynote. It was a broom analogy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and oddly enough, I just presented just the other day and used that again. Really, it's just when you take a broom and you balance it, I divide it into 3 sections. And if we only care about, if you focus on the bottom's third, you focus on the middle third, or you focus on the top third. And the analogy is this, that when you look and let outside noise affect you by focusing on the bottom third, you're not very stable. You can't balance things. Then if you maybe move up and you're in that middle third, and you have maybe a more trusted adults, or if you're looking at it and you have other people influencing you, the broom, as you're balancing it, will become much more steady. And if you're looking at, say, goals, and you're worried about the bottom rung being goals that other people want for you versus maybe what you want for yourself, or then if you look at the very top, your goals or your organization, your teamwork, your desires, or whatever it may be. And if you focus on the very top of that broom, Rachel, you can take any broom, big push broom, whisk broom, you can steady that thing in the palm of your hand, flat out palm of your hand, staring at that. But the moment you take your eye off that goal, that broom's going to fall. And that's the reality of life, is when we take our minds off the goal, when we get sidestruck, on other things, we lose our focus, and we let outside noises influence us, or people maybe make decisions for us that we shouldn't allow that to happen, we're going to lose our broom's going to fail. Our teamwork's going to fall, all those different things. So the ability to balance that broom is basically to keep your eye on your goal is the whole story behind that.
Excellent analogy. I really appreciated that. And I appreciate you sharing that with our members. And I want to shift gears a little bit and jump into CTE. And what is it that makes CTE education so critical in today's world from your perspective as an assistant superintendent at a tech center?
Well, I think it's paramount. It's the lifeline for everything that we need and have to have. We all enjoy the modern conveniences of air conditioning when it's hot or heat when it's cool. We all enjoy the ability to use the infrastructure that we are able to travel on with roads and shipping and all the different things. And without career technical education, without the careers, we would not be able to do those things. We would not be able to benefit from those. So I feel that career technical education is a huge service to society. And anytime you're serving society, man, you're going to make things so much better. And I really think, and we're seeing an uptick in our area. Of course, our state as well has really dedicated an incredible amount of resources, dollars, times to the advancement of career technical education. And in that regard, it's really advanced. I mean, it's no longer, there's a lot of automation. We are a strong area of manufacturing and healthcare. And one of the things we do is we really try to demonstrate and show that it's not just what you would have thought, if you're 50 years age, like myself, it's not what it used to be. And I think CTE education is so critical because it is the absolute future of our really world. If you want to look at it in that way, it's really flattened the world, quite honestly.
And speaking of manufacturing, I was with a group of students on Friday who they were wrapping up their pre-apprenticeship in manufacturing through the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. And we wrapped up the whole experience with a tour of the Reese's plant. So they got to see how.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was phenomenal, but it's also so fascinating to see how much it's changed. But we still have this perception of people standing on the assembly line, and that's just
right.
Not the case. It's so automated, it's so advanced, there's so much robotics and technology involved in it. And you also share, and folks listening in, be sure to expand upon the details to not only read about Frank, but to also tap into some of his other resources that are in the notes for the podcast. The one that I'm talking about now, you can reference that there. But you were on Tusk Talks, and you talk about the longest running manufacturing camp in Ohio that you're involved with. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. It's the Dale Lauren Polen Summer Manufacturing Camp. And the reason it's named Dale Lauren Polen, he was one of our founding fathers of manufacturing here in Tuscarawas County. When we're talking about Lauren manufacturing, Lauren industries, it's just, so we named it in his regard. And really what this is a camp for incoming 7th and 8th graders and the employers, the local manufacturers, and we're talking anywhere from 20 to 30 of them, actually use our career center. We partner with them. They use our labs. They actually teach the multiple competencies. Each company, each industry, each manufacturer will take a competency, whether it's safety, logistics, or whatever it may be. And they will actually teach the competencies. They'll rotate through 4 roughly 45-minute hands-on sessions with each of those in the morning. And then we put them on the school buses. We do 2 industry tours each afternoon. This year we did a 3-day camp. It used to be a 4-day camp. We've done it 6 years. We lost a couple years just because of COVID, but we have room for 80. And this year we were a little about 72 campers signed up, and it is an incredible experience. And no one can tell their story like the manufacturers. I can say, we go to, Progressive Foam, and here's what they do. But until those people come in, give of their time, their talents, their resources, they're teaching the competencies, and then touring in the afternoon. What a great way to dispel all the myths about manufacturing. And one thing we like to talk about in this area, it's amazing because it's just not local. It's just not state. It's just not regional. In many cases, our companies are global. And we're a small rural community. You know, when you talk about Tuscarawas County, our biggest city is probably 30-some thousand. So it's much rural farmland and manufacturing and healthcare. And these people put their times, their talents, their treasures into really trying to grow their own workforce and dispel the myths. And you can see all the automation. It's amazing that once, you know, what people thought manufacturing is to what it is now. And we used to even, Rachel, add a Friday on that, which was an exploration celebration. We had 1 year hot air balloons. We had 1 year with a rib cook-off. And there again, the employers are there telling their story.
That is amazing. You know, I can't help but wonder if we have had these exposures when we were in high school. I'm assuming you didn't have this type of exposure when you're in high school.
That's accurate. Yeah, the only thing I remember taking, I think we took a career interest test at one time. Like, you know, they gather everyone and you're in the school cafeteria taking this test, but I don't ever remember anything ever coming of any of that.
No, nothing like this, but I can only imagine what our trajectory could have or would have been. I'm very happy with mine, don't get me wrong, but it's just interesting to think how those different types of exposures can make such an impact on young people and change the direction they go into.
Yeah, and I would say that I guess the hat's off. You know, a lot of people we've gone at the state level and talked about this because it was Senator Sherrod Brown had initiated it, but our people just said, here, we're going to do it. And when we go and present at the state level, people say, well, who pays for this or who does that? Our manufacturers do. We partner with them. We feed them. The state of Ohio is set across career technical dollars. We feed them breakfast. We feed them lunch. We feed them snacks. The employers load them up with things, but they are making a huge investment because sometimes a company will come here, Rachel, and they may bring 6 or 8 people. There's for example, one of the Plymouth Foam is one of the, so they make siding, like vinyl siding. So they don't install siding for a living. They produce it, but they build a mock walls, 4-sided, couple of those, and they've got kids using their product to install it and do hands-on and say, oh, by the way, we produce this. You know, so many stories like that here locally, but they're giving up 5, 6, maybe sometimes 8 of their employees are here in the morning. So it is a great investment, and they're hoping to see, you know, to grow your own, if you will. If we expose people at a young age, maybe they come to the Career Center, maybe they don't, maybe they go across the street to Kent State Tuscarawas and go into an engineering field or a manufacturing field. But ultimately, I think it's, 72% of all Americans live within 18 miles of where they grew up. So chances are, if they can get into them early and often, you know, the quarterback, Ryan Day, does not wait. We say this a lot of times. He's the head coach of Ohio State football. Chances are he doesn't wait till a kid's a senior in high school to start recruiting them. He'd probably start looking a lot younger.
So true. And, you know, see, this is what makes CTE so special and so unique and just different from anything else that kids experience in their academic career. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on observations for teachers. We talked a little bit about this before we started this recording, but what are your thoughts on teacher evaluations, observations, and should it be consistent with what other teachers, with the tool that's being used with all teachers?
Yeah, that's a great question. In Ohio, several years ago, I think one of my very first years as a principal, we piloted the Ohio Teacher Evaluation System. Well, now it's in its second iteration of it. It will OTES 2.0, I guess. But as you look at all the standards and you look at what career technical teachers are really all about, I guess there is maybe a little bit of disconnect. I think the Ohio evaluation system has incredible value, but I don't know if there's enough in there that ties directly to career tech teachers. They do have end of course exams that each of them have to take, but anytime I feel that my belief is anytime you're taking a test, preparing for a test, you're maybe taking a kid that came here to work and learn to use their hands, to build things, to produce things. You're taking time from that opportunity. So when you look at the evaluation systems, Here in Ohio, everyone falls under the same one. It's not separated out where there's career tech evaluations and or Ohio normal teacher evaluations. So that does make it a little bit more difficult. Now, I would say probably the hands-on portion of a rubric, I would think the career tech teachers have the advantage on that, but it would be neat to be able to somehow structure it just a little bit different. And we're maybe doing some of that, Rachel, with the focus Ohio is really taking on industry recognized credentials. We're spending a ton of time, and that's the data we're using, our students, where they're coming in, because we feel those are the job getters. If you're coming in and you've not, and then next thing you know, you're leaving as an AWS certified welder, I think that shows great growth for a career technical teacher as well as job readiness for the student.
Absolutely. And speaking of observations and evaluations and just leading CTE in your role as assistant superintendent, how do you grow as a leader? And are there any books that you're reading right now?
I'm an avid reader. Rachel, I really probably in school was not, that opportunity to go to college and play again. Our basketball coach, they put books in our hands. And I remember the very first book I had to read from the coach was Return of the Rag Picker by Og Mandino. And, just interesting reads along that way. But I really like to read anything on leadership that's going to really develop that I can spread. I'm a simple man. I really am. You get me a book that's got a lot of data analytics and different things along that lines, I'm going to get lost in the weeds real quick. But if you put into a story, one that I've read here in the last couple of years and actually reread, and a lot of people see him on social media right now, is Joe Sanfilippo. He's a just now retired superintendent in Wisconsin, but his book Lead from Where You Are, it's just incredible because it's so applicable to everything we're doing. And any of the John Gordon books, any of the parables. I tell you, one of the favorite books I ever read, Rachel, I guess, was The Traveler's Gift by Andy Andrews. And if you like history and you there's so many lessons there, but I guess if you were going to give me, I had to read a book one time on grading and reporting practices. Learned a lot, but that's probably not my cup of tea. But I think I was able to get things out that made plenty of sense. But more practical than anything is my favorite way of leading and learning, and through reading and social media in terms of Twitter. I think that's just an incredible professional development tool. I think we've been able to expand connections. I think we've been able to expand ideas used in the right avenue. I think those are paramount because you're reaching. There's no reason I probably should know and be talking to different superintendents or curriculum directors or people from California, Texas, Indiana, Wisconsin, wherever. But boy, I tell you what, the world gets pretty small, and you can really improve through those avenues.
That's so true. Even just thinking about why we're here today, after you had posted your talk, there's just so much that we can gain, whether it's LinkedIn, Twitter, or those are my main two go-to when it comes to following thought leaders. But you mentioned books that have a story, and I've been reading The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I don't know if you've read that one.
No, that sounds great, though.
It is fantastic, and I absolutely love that they put it all into a story. And they start off saying that it's not real characters. I'm sure it's based on real characters.
Sure.
Fantastic one that is made for business leaders, but is so applicable in education as well.
And that's what I like. Because like Oprah says, right, everyone has a story, and somehow we're able to make connections through that and think about, because the idea is when you read something like that, I like to say, okay, if I was in that situation, or if I'm in front of a group, how can this benefit our team? How can this benefit students? How can this benefit me personally? How can this benefit our family? How can this benefit society? Because there's a way to make those parallels, those twists and turns. That's what I like best about the story type book, the parable or whatever it may be, because there's so many lessons in there that to me, those are great books to have book studies on.
Book studies are so powerful because you glean so much from each other that you would not have had that perspective if you had not heard their insights and their takeaways from it.
Yeah, we all learn differently. We all communicate it a little bit differently, and it's always neat to, I just said this the other day, that you have 2 eyes and 2 ears and only 1 mouth. So you probably should see and hear 4 times as much as you say. And sometimes those book studies are a way to get you to step back and really listen, because if you're doing the leading of a professional development, so many times they just look at you, and if we're talking all the time, we're already saying things we know, so we're not learning. And it's a way of through the story is a way to get engagement and to hear different perspectives.
Well, and one of the things that I love with Twitter is just the quotes that you're able to put out there from what you're reading or what you're learning and doing. Do you have a favorite quote or a mantra?
Well, interesting you say that. When you talk about quotes and things, I go back to 1991, and our coach, we had to keep a notebook, and and we always had a quote or a story. And through my teaching and principal career, so this is my 9th year here, so I don't do it here. Our principal will do a quote of the day on the announcements. But for let me see, what is that? 18 years, I did on the morning announcements a quote of the day. As a teacher, I did it in my classroom, and they kept a notebook of it. I did a quote of the day, and every Friday was a story day. And then as a principal for 8 years, I did a quote of the day over the morning announcements, and I kept every one of those in a notebook, and I didn't use the same ones. So to go to the quote books are huge, but I'd say a couple of things come to mind. I always say my mantra is RDR, relationships determine results. I think the more powerful relationship, you want to have those relationships that last you not only now, but it's going to serve you 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now. So I always say RDR, which is relationships determine results. In the career tech world, I'd say around here, they'll hear me say, how can we say yes? So when someone says, can we do this? Hey, I'd love to have this here. I'd like you to host this. Can you come and speak on this? Can you engage us in this? How can we say yes? I don't want to sit now. How can we say yes is another one that they'll hear me around here all the time say. And I think probably one of my greatest quotes that I remember and like to use and I've used often is by John Wooden. And John Wooden, I think that was in, several books, but there's a choice you have to make in everything you do. And in the end, remember, the choice you make makes you, because life is all about choices. The moment from your feet hit the ground when you get up to when you go to bed, just an incredible amount of choices that can made and to take you a little bit of everywhere, Rachel.
So true. Some choices are they seem less significant, and then later we realize the significance of them. And I love the saying yes. I over the summer I watched a little video clip that Peter Diamandis had shared out. It was a recording that he was interviewing someone from Amazon, and they were talking about how Amazon had, or maybe they still have a policy through Jeff Bezos that they have to say yes to everything. But if they say no, they're basically writing a dissertation. They have to write a report explaining the no.
Yeah.
And I can't help but think, what if we took that approach in education?
Absolutely.
It really makes you think about your yeses and nos.
It does. And we talked about that summer manufacturing camp that we host. When people come here and they say, so I'll give you a perfect example. We have a local industry that manufactures trucks, vac haul, they sweep up, they scrub, whatever it may be. And so they pulled these 2 trucks off the line Thursday, just produced. They bring them down here and they said, hey, we want to do something to show the kids how these operate. So we're going to need hoses for water and barking lot. How can we say yes? Let's get with the custodian. So we hook up hoses so they have thousands of gallons of water to spray out of these things to show these kids how they operate. Just, someone wants to host a graduation party or a banquet. How can we say yes? We have a facility here. We try to, it sits a lot of times empty in the summer for a lot of parts of school. How can we generate people? Because every person that comes in here, then you have a chance to influence. And they may not want to come, even though we have post-secondary education and cake decorating and everything else, but it may be setting the tone for someone later in life. We run a Biddy cross country event where we'll have 300 from kindergarten through sixth grades, 400 kids here running. Well, that's going to bring a couple parents. That's going to bring a couple grandparents. There again, we make the course. We cut up watermelon that our agriculture grows. How can we say yes? We feed them hot dogs. We have bounce houses. It's just bringing people here that may not always see it, because about 80% of your voting population don't have kids in school. So when you want to stop and run levies and things along that lines, you want them to feel welcome. You want them to feel that, hey, this is as much theirs as anyone. So there's where that whole how can we say yes comes about.
That's something that I wish that I had learned earlier in my career, or just realized, because even when I was a teacher prior to moving into leadership roles, there was just that tendency to say no. And as the older you are, you just realize that you get so much more out of a yes, especially if you are looking for how can we, or having the person further explain what it looks like. What would be some advice that you would have for a young administrator, someone who's just entering their role as a CTE director or superintendent, or whatever that role might be in their CTE journey?
I think you just got to jump. One, you got to jump into it with open hands, open arms, open mind. You've got to connect with people. One of the first things when I was interviewing for this job, I really didn't know anything about career technical education. I mean, I grew up in this area, and it was where those kids went. And in reality, probably most of us were those kids, and we just weren't, our families weren't educated enough on what was really happening there to make those quality decisions. We were listening to the outside people. They were focused on the bottom of the broom. So I think the biggest thing is, it goes back to that relationship. I made cold calls. I did a little research and said, okay, these are the 2 or 3 high level career centers in Ohio. Because one of the things I had to do for this job, Rachel, was the interview. Ohio was going from just career technical programs to career technical courses. And I was supposed to do an interview, presentation on how we were going to do that in a staff meeting. Well, there was absolutely nothing out on the website because it was still being built. So I did a little research, asked some, and I made trips 2-3 hours from where I was to cold call people to make those connections and ask questions. So I guess when you're getting into this, one, be very open-minded, be open-armed, be willing to reach out, because career technical education is a special world. In Ohio, there are 49 career centers just like us, 48 other ones. Now, there's compacts and comprehensives as well. But what is neat about having the 49 is you can call someone who has a similar role to you, who has been in it, because you're all eating from the same pie. You're all in the same battle. And man, is it a helpful community in that regard. And then that's where your relationships continue to build. But Rachel, I came in, there was 2 stacks on my desk. I didn't take that month off between jobs like I probably should have. So I was supposed to start here, I think July 1. I left my other one in June, and I came in, there's 2 stacks on my desk. I had no clue what any of it was, but you just kind of start making connections and be willing to admit you do not have all the answers.
So true. And also being okay with knowing that there are going to be mistakes, that there's that it's going to be a little messy when you're getting started and trying to hit the ground running.
You mentioned that when I have this, and I know we're not on camera, but I got this huge eraser, and I mean it's I don't know, it's 4 or 5 inches long, big pink thing, and it says 4 big mistakes. I always keep that real handy right there. And I remember when I first got a principal's job, I handed it to the superintendent at our thing. He says, "You better keep that."
Is that on Amazon? Where can I order that?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember where I found it, but I do. It's so important to realize you're going to mess up, but hey, you've got a lot of people willing to help you, and keep moving forward and learn from it. Don't repeat mistakes, and it's all going to work out.
So true. That's some more sound advice for our new administrators. And if you were going to have a 30-minute Zoom call or maybe have dinner with someone who's either currently here or walked the earth at any point in time, who would it be and why?
Wow. I love that question. And because there again, it makes you think. And for me, I think, and if I look beyond just family or anyone like that, I'd want to sit down with Abraham Lincoln. I just think, my question would be, how did you do it? When you stop and look at about all the different times that he was defeated, his failure in businesses and all those different things. And then you move into when he is president, and no matter what, he's got over half the country that hates him, disagrees with him. Not to mention, I'm sure some of them doubted him on his own side. How did he continue to have the courage to make the right decision for all? Because that's not easy. No one I really think loves to go through life with people just disliking them. But in leadership, you got to make hard decisions, and it's not. I think Nick Saban says, if you want to be, if you want to be popular, sell ice cream and don't be a leader. But I'm telling you, it is for Abraham Lincoln, for what he did and had to go through, and the hurdles, and just knowing every decision every day. I think that would just be a fascinating conversation.
Yeah, I'd never thought about it that way as far as how he felt about the dissent and the folks who were just adamantly against him. That's interesting. Sometimes we just have them in such, people who are historical figures. We forget the emotions and what they went through as well.
Yeah, and I mean, when you start to looking at, gee whiz, nervous breakdowns, failure business, lost elections, family tragedy. Just how did you continue? What made you get up the next day and put your feet on the floor and say, I'm going to win today. I'm going to win today, and then I'm going to worry about tomorrow. That would, to me, would just be a fascinating conversation.
So true. So true. And the last question I have for you, Frank, is CTE is just such a phenomenal part of education and obviously what we do. If there's anything that you could change about CTE or just education in general, what would it be and why?
For CTE, I think just how do we continue to reward the application of what they're doing? I think anytime that educationally, we talked a little bit about evaluation, anytime we've got to add something to our plate educationally, whether that be a graduation requirement, an additional course that say, okay, you got to have 4 years of math versus 3 years of math. Well, that time comes out of the hands-on learning aspect. And I think that one of the things that I'd like to see is how can we get more time into career technical education, how we're structured. About half our day is academics and about half is lab. That means in a 2-year period, you're getting maybe a full year of lab time. And in that time, we're building homes and doing community service projects. But I think there's a lot of time that when I was growing up, I think you had to come and you had to finish 2 academics. So that time's got to come from somewhere. I guess the application of the knowledge being measured and providing more time for that in these settings. Don't paint us all with the same broad brush. The other thing I think that would maybe really help education in general, and I know this is some states may be doing this more than we are, and I know it has to do maybe with weather and air conditioning stuff. I'm more of a proponent for year-round education, and I think you retain more. I think your teachers will be a little fresher. And by that, I'd say, okay, let's say you do 9 weeks, then take 2 weeks off and come back to another 9 weeks. So that gets you into the holidays, and maybe take an extra week at the holiday and take then 9 weeks and take 2, and then 9 weeks and take 3. I think you retain more. I think there's an avenue of teachers being refreshed, students being refreshed. I think I would love to see that as a possibility.
I could not agree more with the year round and having more breaks, but shorter breaks. Even with our teachers just came back this past year, And I had several teachers mention, especially those who had just moved from industry into teaching, and it was their first summer break. And they just said it was too long. It was too much time away from the job that they were just ready to be back. So that was refreshing to hear that they were eager to be back. But yeah, I can imagine that would be beneficial to have the more frequent breaks. And I bet there's some brain science behind that too.
I would just think your retention and different things along that line. And I think, hey, my wife's a fourth grade teacher, so I know sometimes the battles that she may fight on a daily basis could be completely different than battles I go through or anyone else. But I'm thinking that if the retention of knowledge, the building upon skills, I mean, we sit here and then we shut it down. Basically, in Ohio, most places are May and just now getting ready to go back. So that's just always been one of my thoughts.
Well, Frank, is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience?
Well, Rachel, I enjoy these opportunities. I enjoy your podcast. And the other thing on career technical administrators and the new into the role, get involved in organizations, become a member of your state groups, become a member of the NCLAs, the ACTEs, because the resources are plentiful. And Joe Sanfilippo says it all the time, hey, we're all in this together. And I really believe that for society to continue to improve and get back to where it needs to be, we are all in this together. And CTE, career technical education, the people that are involved in it, the skills that are being taught, people like yourself that are continuing to lead, I can't tip my hat enough to all those opportunities. And I think it is a difference maker. We talk all the time here about discovering your passion and preparing for your future. And I think that is certainly paramount for all success because we all benefit from it.
Well, thank you, Frank. And it's been such a pleasure to finally have you on the podcast. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And for the folks who are listening in, if you have topics that you'd like for us to address in future episodes, or if you would like to be a guest on a future episode of the NCLA podcast, please contact us at info@ncla-cte.org. And thanks again, Frank.
Thank you so much for having us.